We are off. So what's going on? How's your day?
First meeting of the day right now, so it can't be too bad.
Meeting? Did I took your time like that?
Yeah, I mean, when you were like, so give me a day, I really thought it was gonna be like in the next couple of weeks, but it was the following week. Here we are.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I try to take advantage of all the time that is allotted to me, and I think both of us probably have our fair share of work to do. And I'm actually down in LA right
Oh,
now, and yeah, I was trying to figure out. Yeah, I have this thing where I'm assuming it's probably part of being in school. You know what I mean? Like just getting stuff done and like, oh, this would be great to do right now. So I really don't have any excuses on my end as to why I can't get things done. Um, but I also have to remind myself not to like, I don't know, get overwhelmed. I think it's super easy as you can tap back into you being back in grad school. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Super easy to overwhelm yourself, not give yourself a break. Yeah, did you have that when specifically? I mean, obviously.
Grad school, grad school was it wasn't as hard as it was annoying for me. I just, you're talking about interesting things with folks that are wherever they're at in their process and in their like own personal like decolonization of their practice or of their identities. And so in my school I felt like there was a lot of really wealthy people that went there, and so they had a different sort of a lens that they were bringing to social work. And not to say that I didn't get a great education, but definitely I found myself frustrated at times with sort of like the narrative and like pathologizing in general, or like being like a paternalistic sort of like approach to social work, especially because I was coming into social work from more of like a social justice lens. And so, I would just get annoyed. Um,
Where was the disconnect? You talk about people in your program network, you know, approaching social work with this lens of wealth. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, how was that kind of like? How was that for you? Yeah, what was that like? Did you find it harder to connect with those folks because of maybe their lack of understanding of the communities that they were going to be learning about, or yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. It was challenging. It was frustrating, and I also just needed to like protect my peace. And so, like, I wasn't gonna go into spaces where I was like, I think that you're wrong, and like I had to check in with myself to see how much energy I had to
absolutely.
to speak up or to say anything. I wasn't just gonna go in there and like argue with everybody. I was lucky enough to find like a few folks that I connected with that are still my friends to this day, but overwhelmingly, I would say that I had to figure out when to speak up, when to not speak up. And my face probably betrayed me pretty often in classes and like in discussions. And that's fine. Like, it is what it's going to be.
Um, when you were, if you can go back, when you were going into grad school, were you looking for like a larger kind of community of folks? I mean, that was something I was looking for. I was looking specifically for a larger community within higher academia. And what's ended up happening is the same thing. I kind of connected with a smaller group of folks, and I just wanted to get your take on that. Like, were you okay with the small group? Were you looking for something larger? How did that work throughout your grad school experience?
Yeah, I think I also have always approached school and work in this very rigid way of like, I don't go to work to make friends, and I wasn't going to school to make friends. Like, I already had a community of folks. I was in New York, but there was a bunch of like Bay Area transplants, and I had also like made some like local, like Brooklynite friends when I was there. And so I wasn't really at school to try to connect with folks. I was connecting with people outside of school. And so it wasn't that challenging. It was just mostly like me going to class, and sitting through class, like sitting through discussions that I found uncomfortable, or hallway talk, right? Like before and after classes. Like, I always remember, like, those were the ones that kind of stuck out to me the most, where I was like, "Fuck, can we just start class already? Like, I'm not trying to control."
So you really kind of had tunnel vision in a sense. You're like, I'm
I
trying to
did.
get this thing kind of done and, you know, get as much as I can out of it.
I did. I connected with some of my professors. I also was very intentional around only seeking like adjunct professors because I really wanted to connect with folks that were still in the field, that were not just super academic. That's a value also, but I knew that I was not going to like go into academia. Like I knew that I was going to go right into clinical work, and so it was important for me to hear stories that really resonated with what I was going to be doing after school.
What do you think the benefits are of those adjunct professors? Because I think there's something there that I like about the adjunct professor, and specifically about still being in the field. So, what is it that you like about that?
Yeah, I think I just felt like they were more relevant. I felt like they were able to convey some of the theories, or some of the, like, whatever they're trying to teach us in a more pragmatic way related to their actual work that they were still involved in and still seeing day to day, versus somebody who's talking about something that they saw in the field 20 years ago. Like, it's going to be a snooze fest for me, right? I'm going to need them to like keep me entertained and keep me engaged. And it's going to need to speak to my actual experience. And so, that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very apparent if you're kind of a professor who, not to say you're lazy, but you've been in a routine for a really long time, and it's really hard to break out of routine. And if you're not in the field and you're not being exposed to the nuance, that it's just it's apparent. I mean, we both sat in classrooms with people who are detached. You know, they have they might have the letters behind their name and they have the title, but um, yeah, just not up to breast on what is going on in the world, right? Very like
Yeah.
academic focus, not like you were talking about the pragmatic side of education.
And I think that if I was gonna go into academia, that probably would have been the people that I would have like really leaned into and really like sought out to have as mentors. But that's not necessarily my focus back then. So
Yeah, I mean that's what I want to do. I mean, I do want to go back and teach, and this has been a great example throughout my first year, but specifically right now, just with like virtual learning, right? To see some of the classes that I'm maybe not as interested in, to really look at teaching styles, right? That's kind of the challenge that I've put in front of myself. Like, okay, start to look at how people are teaching. What does this look like specifically when we're communicating in this new way? Like what to utilize, what not, what not to. Um, but yeah, either way. So what do you? Yeah, I wanted to have you on because I think you're probably someone who has a lot of insight on what is going on. Well, one of the things that's going on right now, and that's the issue with you know police violence, specifically the relationship between police officers and Black and brown folks. And I can't remember. I think it was our mutual friend Omar who told me that you were doing work with. I think he might have said first responders, but either way, I couldn't remember. But then that's why I texted you. I was like, oh my god, yeah, this is boom. This is exactly what I want to talk about. So yeah, I guess how did you end up? What kind of work are you doing currently with? What is it? De-escalation?
I can get into that.
Yeah, go for it.
But I also want to come back to sort of your post grad school like teaching ambitions. I want to hear about what you want to do with that. I'm
Oh,
super.
yeah,
We'll,
you
we'll
go.
get back to that.
Yeah.
So I have currently for the next 6 months, I'm like on a different program, but I'll tell you what sort of the bread and butter of my clinical career has been. For the last 6.5 years, I was working on a mobile crisis response team
Sure.
for youth and adolescents. And for the last 3.5 years, I was a program supervisor. And so the goal of the program was to reduce unnecessary hospitalization and unnecessary police involvement.
Okay.
The idea behind that being that mental health professionals should be responding to mental health crises. What a concept! Like, what a concept. Um, and that program that I was supervising, that I'm still closely connected to, I'll be back there in between January and June of next year,
Sure.
has been in Contra Costa County for 18 years. So it's kind of like we've been doing the defund the police stuff for the last 18 years, and I've had the luxury of doing it for the last 6.5 years. Um, I get really excited when I talk about crisis work. I feel like I'm addicted to crisis work. I feel like I will, I don't know that I'll ever work in anything else. Maybe I will, who knows? But like I get drawn to crisis work for a lot of reasons. I think that just from like the mental health perspective, how special is it to like share a crisis with somebody? Like how special is it to be like a grounding anchor,
Mhm.
spirit energy with someone who is in the middle of maybe the worst day of their life, right? Maybe not. Maybe they're disclosing to you that they want to kill themselves, that they have, they've been stealing their parents' pills, that they've been walking over a bridge every morning that they're thinking about jumping over, and you're the first person that they're disclosing that to. What an honor.
Mm.
And with that, what a responsibility. What a responsibility to do something well, like to hold that well for them. Um, and so that being said, sort of a lot of the kids that we see, their parents, like it's their first time ever hearing that their kids have maybe been struggling with these thoughts, or maybe they found a suicide note, or maybe they've seen some superficial marks on their arms.
Wow.
X, Y, and Z. And so in our county, so we'll go out there, two clinicians will go out there and kind of talk to the youth and talk to the parent. I would say with our program, about 40% of our calls are suicide risk, self-harm calls. 60% of our calls are like family conflicts, which can also escalate and be dangerous and kind of push folks to not be their best selves. And so we send out two clinicians. We may or may not have ever met you before. We may not like know anything about you. We'll ask you basic questions about sort of if you want us to come out there, how you're feeling about it. If your kid wants us to come out there, we'll tell the parent, if your kid doesn't want to talk to us, we're not going to force them to talk to us, but we can go out there and support you and think about what other services we can connect you to. We try to de-escalate. We try to come up with a safety plan. We try to look for sort of natural respite or natural connections that we can tap into. Maybe there's like an aunt or an uncle or a cousin or a neighbor that the youth can go to for the next few hours if it's like a family conflict type of a thing. And if it is sort of more of a self-harm or a suicide assessment that we're doing, we'll do a full assessment. And if we're trying to, again, tap into like the natural resources and the natural supports, right? Can you commit to safety for the next 10 hours? Do you have your psychiatrist appointment tomorrow or your therapist appointment tomorrow? And so can we figure out a way to keep you supervised and connected? How are you feeling? We're going to ask the kid, do you feel like you can stay safe? What do you feel like you need? What would be helpful for you in this moment? And so after we do all of that, if we get to a point where we can't stabilize and we don't, clinically, we can't justify not getting them a higher level of care, then we have to figure out how to get them to a CSU, a crisis stabilization unit. And so, wait, I'll stop there. You have any question?
No, go. I mean, this is something pretty new for me, right? Like this is really a learning opportunity for me because I've never really been exposed to someone talking about this in depth. So I really do want you to go.
Okay.
And yeah, like don't. Yeah, when.
Okay. Well, you just cut me off if you feel like it.
No.
So,
Yeah, no.
so we definitely want to stabilize, right? We want to keep folks in their homes. We want to keep kids wherever they want to be at. We want parents to feel supported. But if we get through all of that and we determine that they need higher level of care, they need to go to the hospital. They need to be placed on 5585 is the designation for kids. 5150 is for adults. It's like danger to self for others or gravely disabled. But usually it's danger to self for kids. And so we can't transport them. And so if the parents can transport them, right, which is like a whole nother like clinical decision of like, do they have a history of jumping out of the car? Do they want to go to the hospital? Do they know that they need to go to the hospital, or do they hate going to the hospital? So if the parents can't get them there safely, we can't write holds. We're not designated to do that in the county, only county workers. And that's a county by county decision. You'll see in the state of California, it's different. In some counties, we can write holds, but then you still have to think about transportation. So you have to have a contract with the ambulances.
Okay.
And then that's like a whole nother realm of like, sometimes like EMTs, like law enforcement there to support, sometimes they don't. It's just like a whole nother culture. We'll get to that.
Okay.
But so if we determine that they need to go to the hospital and they can't be transported there by their parents, we need to call law enforcement to write the 5585 and to set up transportation. That for us is about 17 to 19% of the time
Wow.
uh, that we're having to place them on holds or like support in getting them placed on a 5585 hold. Um, so that means we have a lot of
Are
experience.
you ever concerned about your safety in any of these situations?
You know, I feel like safety is such a coded word. I feel like it's such a like I have so many feelings about that word. I'm concerned about my safety, regularly in different situations,
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Um,
like in many different situations. But definitely, I think that I have been trained up well enough to think about trained up both professionally and just personally in life to kind of know how to show up to a space that isn't yours, right? And know how to act and know how to carry yourself. And there's
yeah, yeah, I'm
and
just
that's it.
imagining kind of approaching this as you were talking about, somebody potentially, you know, being in a state where, they're really not okay. And but this could be a last moment.
Yeah.
Um,
We're not like super duper first responders. So we'll definitely like if someone's calling us and they're like, my kid is acting up, or my kid is starting to say this, we're gonna go through a triage, right? We're gonna be like, we're
right.
gonna ask like, what are they doing in this moment? Is it safe? Like there have been times where we have to call law enforcement and then head out there because we're hearing violence already happening, or the parents say, can you just send the police and also come out here? And so we're definitely going through that initial triage, but in that moment, yeah, there are times where there's like, environmental sort of like chaos happening,
Yeah.
or in that moment, someone is, maybe they're internally preoccupied, or maybe they're paranoid, or there can be a lot of different things. And so I think, again, I rely on my training. I've had great like mentors at work that have a lot of experience in clinical work. And also just like being in tune with the person that you're assessing of like, is it cool for me to sit here? Do you want me to sit over there?
Yeah.
I'm Johanna. Nice to meet you. How are you?
Yeah.
Like, can I talk to you? Oh, okay. Nope, you made that. No, that's cool. I'll be over here with your mom if you do want to talk. Like really kind of having that connection, or trying to have like establish that connection with the patient or the client, or whatever you want to call.
So you're making this sound very 1, 2, 3, and and not to say that it's not for you, um, but what you're talking about in this practice is a concept that I think, like you said before, defunding the police, or I like to say reform, because I don't know. I'm not sure where I stand with defunding, right? Because I really am focused on this idea of getting police off. I don't hate police officers. I think police officers do really hard work, and I think there are some great police officers, and I also think that there are some shitty ones, who have no business in with that kind of power. You know what I mean? And I know people like that personally, like folks I grew up with, where when I found out they were a cop, I was like, wow, oh, okay. Um, but I do think they need more training and more understanding of how to work with the communities, be a part of that community, right? Like, so how do we get someone to have that approach? When I say someone, how do we get police officers to have that same approach that you're entering these spaces in, where you are so concerned about the person and how they're doing, checking in with them, right? Now, granted, no, I mean, again, I want to be fair here. I don't know what that's like to walk into a lot of situations where there's a chance somebody might kill me, right? That there's like my life is on the line. Um, but I do think there has to be some focus on de-escalation and learning how to talk to someone, and it can't always be, I'm going to shoot you because I don't know how to deal with you. So how how do we
Yeah.
go from your 1, 2, 3?
My 1, 2, 3 is not a 1, 2, 3. I like to give the framework of what the goal is, but it's like a 1, it's a 7, it's a 9, then you're back to the 2. It's all over the place. Like that's what it is.
Yeah,
But I think to speak to your point of like the defunding the police versus reform, like let's get into that. Like I think that I appreciate you kind of like bidening the answer of it. Like, that's fine. I get why people like shy away from saying defund. And
yeah,
I actually asked my CEO the other day, like in this meeting, I was like, so how do you feel? And he kind of had to pivot also. And what he said was, I don't support it, but actually I support funding the police for exactly what they're trained to do.
yeah,
So I guess that does mean that I support it. And so like just going, I think that
yeah.
whatever we want to call it, because people get triggered by certain words, we can call it.
Mhm.
But I think that in essence, people that are responding to mental health crises should
Mhm.
have pretty extensive mental health training.
Yeah, that should be part. That's like a
That's like
curriculum.
part of it. And the other part of it is also this culture and this like the culture of how we look at people that are experiencing mental health crises, how we talk to them, how we connect with them. Because I've also been at calls where there will be, a very well meaning sort of officer who's going to start talking about how you just need to take your pills and your life's not this hard and you just need to work harder because your mom. And I'm like, if lecturing somebody out of depression worked, there would not be social work schools, right? Like I wouldn't have a job. Like,
Yeah, I'd be out of a job.
um, and that's annoying. And not helpful. And I've also had the like very well-meaning, I'm sure, cop that comes in and is like, I'm gonna take you to juvie. And I'm like, also, if that worked, like that also doesn't work. And so, but at the end of it, what I think the most important like part of that is that the power dynamic in that is that the cop is always gonna have more power
Yeah.
than the social worker.
Hmm.
And so if we're not also shifting that paradigm, it doesn't matter how much training they have because they will be able to make the last call, the final decision on like, oh, I've been here long enough, so I'm just going to turn into like this bossy, pushy officer now and that might really make the situation worse. But they have that power, right? And so I think that like it's education, but also like a sort of power cultural shift where it's not all up to them, like it's not just up to them. Yeah.
There's got,
So
yeah, there's got to be some accountability. I mean, a lot of this stuff is accountability, right? Like, if you don't think that you're really gonna, you don't really think that what you're doing is a problem, and no one's really gonna call you out for it. I mean, like what I heard you talk about is this kind of us versus them mentality,
mhm,
right? And I've seen that, and parts of that is kind of like that, the tribal kind of part of us as human
yeah,
beings, right? And then the other part is like kind of falling into the propaganda, right? I feel like when you talk about culture, that's what I think about when I think about police officers. Man, it's so easy to fall in because
mhm,
it's a huge system and it's an old system. And there's probably great parts if in terms of community connection, just because no one really understands. I would say the same thing with like a social worker, right? Not, I mean, it's hard sometimes to really connect or like have conversations with people because they're like, oh, I don't think you understand like the inner workings of all this stuff. Kind of
yeah,
when you were mentioning, you know, folks who mean well, but are just kind of like with this pick yourself up by your own bootstraps, right?
mhm,
That idea of like, well, no, it's much more complicated than that, right? Much more complicated.
mhm.
So what are you thinking with this, with potential reform? So you've been doing, actually, this is hilarious because you've been doing this work for so long, and this is a new concept that we're hearing, kind of, you know what I mean? So technically it's not new, but in the mainstream media,
Mhm.
mainstream conversations, now we're starting to talk about this
Yeah.
idea of like de-escalation. What's been your experience with police officers or first responders?
Yeah. I mean, they varied. And I also want to go back to what you said about like that you don't hate police officers and like that some of them are great and some of them are terrible. And like, obvio, yeah, like that is what it is. Yes. And it's the same, it goes the same for like social workers. Actually, if you think about it, there's plenty of folks that come into social work school and they all think that they're like Michelle Pfeiffer in Dangerous Minds. Like, that's not what it is, boo. Like, stop,
Yeah,
stop. And so, and social work, in the same way as law enforcement, is also a victim and a product of the white supremacist structure that our country was like founded on. And so, like, we are not innocent. Law enforcement isn't innocent. Social work isn't innocent. And so, no, I also don't. You know, I feel like supporting defund the police doesn't mean I want to see all cops destitute in the street, homeless. Like that's not what we're saying, right? And so, yeah, just like I think it's important to like give that disclaimer.
yeah, you got to make sure you do it. Got to make
Exactly why.
Yeah, somebody would think that you know you're a police hating,
Not. I'm
just
not.
guy, and I
And so,
don't get that vibe from you.
yeah. And so my experience with law enforcement has been like, it has varied. And you're right. And it has been with first responders because, sometimes it can be an impatient EMT who's kind of like, really quick to put somebody on 5-point restraints that really shouldn't be on 5-point restraints. And how traumatizing is that, or can that be, right?
Yep.
Um, So I've had really great interactions with law enforcement and with EMTs. I would say that the best ones have been where they're really patient and they really kind of like let the social workers take the lead, but are super collaborative, and just take their time. You know what I mean? Like sometimes um, it might, there might be someone who's having like a manic episode and maybe they just need some time to like figure out that they're gonna go to the hospital today, that's gonna happen. Maybe they hate going to the hospital and they've been there several times and it's not helpful. That's the other part of it, is that I think that like for law enforcement, I think that like the overall sort of mental health sort of system instruction that we function in like is not that well, and the continuum of care is
Sure.
not really doing that well. And so there might be a family or a youth or an adult that like cycles through these systems pretty frequently.
No.
And so it makes sense that officer so and so would be extremely impatient and extremely frustrated
No.
and just be ready to put somebody in handcuffs and throw him back of an ambulance, because they know that once they go to the hospital they'll be there for 12 hours, maybe 2 days, and they'll be right back in this house and they'll be called back again in 3 or 4 days. Um, and so I want to name that, like, I see that, and I'm sure that the cops see that, and I'm sure that they're not with the shit. That's not what they went to the academy for.
Sure.
And it's okay for them to not like those calls. It makes sense for them to not like those calls. And so that's where defund or reform comes in. Let us take care of those.
Yeah.
Let us take care of those. Let us take lead on those.
Right.
And at the same time, let's also continue to reform the other sort of sections of mental health care so that it's not this revolving door, and so that it's not just folks that are not qualified to treat this, tired of this, have just come from. This is another thing that I do actually when I talk to like my new clinicians. I try to like give a lot of context from what I know about law enforcement of like, okay, we have like reflective supervision, we have EAPs, we have all these different like spaces where we get to talk about what our day was like and like what's coming up for us, right? I've been at a mental health call when a really nice cop gets there and he's like, I'm so sorry we were running late. We were just at this shootout. And I was like, okay, do you need a minute? Like, I
Right.
don't.
Relax. Like, yeah, right. That's not a normal thing. You know what I mean? Like, that's not normal at all.
Thank you for naming that, officer. And like, do you want some water? Like, what's up? Like, and I want you. Do I need to sage you? What do you need before you come in to talk to my youth, who just wants to like, who's just upset over the Xbox and said they're gonna kill themselves? Like, it's not like, how could you imagine that being your day?
Look, man, I'm so glad you mentioned this because I mean, it's not just about you know, training cops on de-escalating. I think another major piece is implementing mental health into police officers' routine. You know what I mean? Like I was talking to my mom about, something I'd like to see to start would have, like like just right off the bat, like every month we're doing mental health check-ins every month. She was like, every month? That's a lot. I was like, a lot? I'm like, well, I'm thinking you should do it every week.
Uh-huh.
Like every week you should have a check-in to see where you're at. You know what I mean? Because I can't imagine, run into your office after I just left a shootout, and then I'm gonna try to approach a child that's having a really difficult time, right? Like, I, of course you're not going to be in the right frame of mind. That's a practice, right? That's something you have to work on. Like, hey, what do I need to do? And right now that's not part of the culture. Um, I don't know enough about the police department, but my assumption is, that's not a conversation, right? Like, hey, after something traumatic happens, maybe take a little bit and get your shit together and then go on. It's like, nope, yep, put that back somewhere. And we know what trauma long term does, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
And I don't think that they're supported in accessing mental health anyways, right? Like I don't know that the culture, I don't want to speak for sort of like an organization that I'm not a part of, but
right,
my understanding from over here is that it's not like that. At the end of the day, they're like, wow, is that like, what do you need? Like, I don't
right.
think, I think it's like they're understaffed. They
Mm-hmm.
work really long shifts. They're not really challenged to work on their like internal implicit biases. They're not really like, like I participated in their crisis intervention training in Contra Costa County, and it's some of the officers, some of the sheriffs, some of the officers are like super into it and ask a lot of questions, and others are like really
Tough.
kindly sort of over me pretty quickly, right? Like
Right, like I don't want to hear you. I don't want to be here. What is this about? So how
yeah.
do you deal with that when you see like what's the I'm
Um
sure you know it as soon as you walk into a room. You're like, yep, you don't care about this.
yeah, you know, I was raised to have really good, strong manners and be respectful. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and do my thing, and I'm gonna thank folks for being there. And the other part of my participating in that training and just my general like law enforcement outreach that I try to do. In my mind, I try to infiltrate any sort of professionally, I try to infiltrate any sort of like law enforcement realm I can. And really, I do that for my clinicians because I want to get my mobile response team and my company's name out there
Mhm.
so that when and if they, you know, there's an officer that gets out there and is interacting with one of my clinicians, they're like, oh, I remember that was that weird little Latin girl who was like talking to us about something. She was all right. Let me be nice to this clinician. So for me, it's like relational, right? And it's relationship building. And I think that that's where the work is, right? Like we have common ground. We have to have common ground. If we don't, that's the problem. But for the like the cops that do, right? And people that are in this work because they do want to help and truly consider themselves helpers, then where do we find that common ground and how do we find something to connect on so that when we're out there together on that call, we actually hear each other,
Yeah.
right? We're actually like, yeah, you're right. Let me wait. Let me know when you need me. I'll be right here. It
Right.
seems you got this. And I've had interactions with certain officers where I'm like, do you want me to draft that for you? Like I know how to, I can write that 250 hold for you. What do you need? What language do you need? How do I make this easier for you? Because I know you don't enjoy this. Um, and so yeah.
But that's not a part. Yeah, that question alone of what do you need, that is not something that we're taught you know what I mean? That's just not something that's implemented into a lot of our upbringing, right? Could you imagine if people were constantly asking like, "Hey, what do you need? What do you need?" You know what I mean? I mean, essentially, it's kindness, right? And that may be empathetic and thoughtful, but that takes time, right? Again, that takes time, and everyone's like, "No, I'm not." Either time to actually assess what they need, or or assess in the police officer's case. Yeah, what's going on with the people around them? Um, you touched on. I want to circle back because you mentioned something about safety and kind of how that can be coded. One of the phrases that that kind of annoys me is this idea of safe space,
Mm,
because I don't know who that's for, right? I don't
mm,
know where that phrase came
mhm, 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 mhm,
from. I don't really believe in the idea of, I don't really believe in the idea of, I don't know where that phrase came from. I don't really believe in the idea of I feel like I'm lying to people when I say this is a safe. I can't guarantee you that.
Mm,
How I reframe it is this is a safe relationship.
mm,
You can trust me in this chaos. We both recognize that there are factors outside of our control, right?
mhm,
But you and me, this you can trust me, okay? And I think that's what essentially what we're talking about with the folks that you're working with, right?
mhm,
Like you need to trust that I'm not here to like hurt you. You know,
mhm.
like I really do want to know what you need as an officer so that you can do the same with the folks that you come in contact with. Um, so what, yeah, I mean, I constantly hear that in my program. I mean, like I'm bombarded with safe space, safe space, safe space. And I listen to who's saying safe space. And a lot of the times it's, they aren't folks of color, you know what I mean? Which always makes me kind of wonder. I'm like, well, you know, who is that? Again, like I said before, who is that phrase for? You know, is it, and I see it in schools and, you know, when I see that in the counselor's office, you know, first one of the questions I want to ask is like, who's that for? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Especially if you're working with in public schools, especially if you're working with black and brown kids, like, is it? You know what I mean? Like a lot of those kids understand like safety. Like, I don't know what that like. What does that mean?
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
you can't. I've heard kids be like, "What do you like? You can't protect me." I'm like, "You're right. Once you walk out of here, I can't. I cannot."
I
Um,
might not even be able to protect you in here. Like, be careful what you say to me. I might have
right,
to call CPS on something I don't
exactly.
believe on.
Yeah.
I don't even believe it. I don't even believe it. But my license is like, tethered to it. And
Mm.
so yeah, like, I mean, I think we've all had sessions with kids where we're like, okay.
Hey, hold on, hold on. Don't say that. No, no, no. You cannot say that in here. Yeah, I've been talking about that with groups, and like you know anything with kids. I'm like, man, I just want to like I start off kind of let's say with your group norms, and you're like, look, these are the things that I am mandated to report if you say it.
Yeah.
So I'm just putting it out there, right? Because I'm on, like I'm on your side, but I have to, you know what I mean? Like this is part of the practice, and I have to protect myself. You know what I mean? Um, so what
Yeah.
got you? Yeah, I want to backtrack a little bit. What got you into social work? Why'd you pursue?
Yeah.
Why'd you pursue what you had? I'm sure you had plenty of other stuff that.
Yeah. Let me see. So it's funny because my parents would probably say that like that was like always what I was gonna do. But I was always my family was pretty oh sorry, hold on. Was pretty politically aware, pretty like probably more radical than I am in a lot of different senses. A lot of senses. My mom is from Guatemala, and so her and her siblings kind of were there during the Guatemalan Civil War. That was pretty much started and infiltrated and funded by the U.S. And so um, a bunch of my uncles that I grew up with that I'm still very close to are like super radical human beings. They don't actually. Most of my family don't like my like law enforcement rhetoric and the fact that like I even have professional relationships with law enforcement. It's very interesting
Yeah.
how I had to like come into my own in that space. Yeah, no, it's really
No, I
fascinating.
could have. Yeah. Well, I mean, it, it goes back to the them and us,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and
And to be fair, my earlier interactions with law enforcement were pretty shitty. Like they were pretty like I mean, I grew up in Hunters Point. Like they were just so they were like it was just ugly, like just
yeah.
ugly, right? And so I get that. But I grew up in that sort of a household. At an early age, I remember talking about I remember being impacted by homeless people. I remember being like seeing people and being like, oh my God, what do they do? Like how do they like what?
Uh,
And so I was always sort of connected to that, and I went to undergrad and I came back from undergrad and I was like, that's cool, Johanna, that you have these ideas, but like, aren't you tired of being poor? Don't you want to make money? And so I thought I wanted to go to law school, and I worked at a law firm for 3.5 years. Um,
it's never too late. You can go back and be a lawyer if you wanted to.
you sound like my mother. I'm so tired of it. Oh my God. So I worked at this law firm for 3.5 years, and we did plaintiff side employment law. And it was, we were in the mission. And so it was a bunch of, mainly like low wage, like restaurant worker folk, that had been taken advantage of by their employers,
Mm.
that they actually had legal standing to go after their employers, because once you work for somebody, like your legal status doesn't even matter. Like once you have delivered a service, you are owed that money in the way that the law says it. And so I really enjoyed hearing people's stories. And I remember being like so fascinated by their stories, and I'm like being so angry and like amped up with them. And the law, like the legal part of it was cool, but it didn't really like feed me. And so after 3.5 years there, I was like, okay, I got it. Like I want to do like policy, social justice stuff. Like, and so the way to get there is to go to social work school. I didn't think I was going to do clinical work at that time.
Okay.
Um, and so I remember there was this woman, who I wrote my grad school essay on, and she was probably like in her 70s or something, and she worked like as one of those, like, the people that take care of the buildings, but then like they get to live there for free-ish or
Oh,
whatever,
yeah.
property manager,
Property
but
man.
it was this like slum, slum. Um, you know where it was? On Mission and like 17th, across the street from the old Goodwill, there
Yep.
was like that old shoe store, or it was like the Asian shoe store. It was that building. And I remember we had to do all this stuff. She couldn't read or write. She was from like a small town in Mexico. And she'd been like super taken advantage of it because she was like cleaning and doing all these things all day, every day. And she lived under the stairs for 4 years,
Mm.
cleaning, taking care of the whole house. And I remember like sneaking in there so I could take pictures for for, for her case. I was committed. And
At
I
17th and Mission, I'm imagining that building, and you sneaking. Let me sneak in here and get these pictures real quick.
I was committed. Um, yeah, I was like,
Committed social, yeah, man. You were
yeah.
yeah.
So so we got her a bunch of money, and then she didn't have a passport and she couldn't read or write. So then I had to go to the consulate with her and figure out all these other things with her. And then I like brought her airplane ticket, and then I walked her to her gate, and like that whole process, that whole journey that I was like a part of with her, like stayed with me. And I was like, this is what I want to do. Like she was wronged.
Nope.
She was wronged. She deserves this.
Mm.
And I can do this. Like I can actually do this. And so that's what really got me into like applying to social work school. When I was applying to social work school, my mom was like, just apply to one law school, just one law school. And I was like,
Honey, come on,
yeah.
just
I was
do
like,
it.
that's not how it works, mom. I never took the LSATs. That's not how it works. It's not just like
Like, yeah. I can't just go. That's not, yeah, not at all.
that.
So that's interesting, because I think that story is, I mean, in terms of this uh, culture we live in of like success and success being equated with money.
Mhm.
Um, and so I had a similar situation recently, actually, with a friend of mine who asked me, about school and like why I was pursuing social work. And I was like, I gave him kind of a brief, kind of synopsis of my road to social work. Similar to you, I've always been I mean, in my mind, not to sound super cliche, but I've always been a social worker. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I love people. I love helping people. And I've always been very understanding. And that's part, my own family. Um, my mom was first generation Mexican woman, grew up extremely poor, uh, but super humble. You know what I mean? Like super humble, smart, but was, the worked for the DA's office and working with the Child Support Bureau for um, 35 years, right? Uh, so I had an example, right, clear as day.
Mm-hmm.
A father who ran helped run kind of late night youth programs in Bayview, and was very very clear that I was a very fortunate and privileged person to have family and people that were here to support me, and that you have to give that to someone else because there's a lot of people who don't have that. You know what I mean? There's so many people who don't have it, and you're not, kind of like don't take it for granted because it could, you're not that far away. Like bad things can happen. You know what I'm saying? We're all that close. We're like, man. So yeah, I heard you talk about, yeah, just heard you talk about that. I was like, oh my God, yeah, so similar. And it's weird, yeah, it's so weird when I meet people. It's becoming more and more weird when I meet people who aren't that way. It really is. I mean, I would assume this is kind of part of the social work the journey, and I mean, family included. There's just some like in my relationships are changing. I just can't connect with people, and that's not a bad thing, right? Like sometimes just relationships, are change. Actually, just about every change isn't a bad thing, but some change is means we're not going to be able to talk as much. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, when it's just hard to connect when I feel like people are detached. Like I got into a conversation with a friend of mine who didn't believe that there were people that were like starving in the country. Like there's not, like there wasn't, he's like, there's not a food shortage here.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, because we were talking about this, like, we were talking about school and like what the ramifications of shutting down schools are. And I was saying, well, I don't think you understand. It's not just school isn't just the classroom. You have kids that rely on school to eat, right? Like that is part, like, and when they don't get that, they don't eat. And I mean, he really had this idea, and that was here, right? Like specifically in San Francisco, where I'm like, man, like in comparison to other parts of the country, like we're ahead of the game in terms of services that we offer to people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's no Glide or there's no, St. Anthony's in certain places. Like, yeah, I don't and I couldn't, I've learned that we're going to disagree, right? I've learned with this friend that we are going to disagree. We get along. I'm okay with some of the stuff, and we have conversations. And I think that's, I mean, one of the things I don't want to do is anytime someone disagrees with me, I turn, I turn away, and because I don't think that accomplishes anything, right? There is a certain level though where you need to be met when having these conversations. So, but it's difficult. Like I said, it's difficult because I'm like, oh my God, man, like you have no idea. Like it's bad out there, specifically right now. Like I don't, I've been, I'm running groups right now for an organization, and the two groups are coping with isolation while working from home, and the other one is um, being a person of color at work. And I hear this common theme of like financial upward mobility in the person of color group.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very fascinated by this because it's kind of like a coping strategy, right? I think we're in, and I started looking on different, different social media platforms to kind of get a pulse of, what I was feeling. And I see a lot of conversations around wealth and like investing. And I'm confused because I'm like, well, where's the money coming from? Like where I don't, like, okay. So anyway, one, where's the money coming from? And two, I don't know. Yeah, there's this like it's shifting your focus away from what is happening. You're like, well, let me just focus on this thing, and money. And that came to mind just because your mom was like, well, is there any money in it? And I was mentioned earlier, my friend, that's essentially what he asked me when I told him about grad school. He was like, is there any money in that? And in one sense, I was like, I have some words for you, but I don't think that.
Why are you checking my pockets, anyways?
Yeah, like what I don't understand what that has to do with with what I said. I'm going to grad school to better myself, to learn, to challenge myself, and immediately went to money. I'm like,
Well, this is like the ethos of this country, right? It's like a super capitalistic society, like individualistic society, and that's where we attach a lot of our self-worth to. And so it makes sense, right? And it's tangible. It's tangible to be successful based on those like money, like where you live, all those type of things, versus like how you impact the spaces that you're in or how you impact people that you work with or work for, right? That's not, you don't carry that around with you. You can't put that on a jacket or a pair of shoes. And so it's also
yeah, go ahead.
it's also like not a value of ours as a society, right? Like look at our president.
Yeah,
Like look at our like it's not a value to be genuinely kind.
no, no, it's not. It's not. What I mean, we could go on and on about where that stems from, or yeah, just I mean, I'm seeing more of it. I try not to go down these roads because I think it's easy. Where you're like, man, just come on, people, you could be more kind. But I do like. I mean, that's one of the things that like I'm missing and seeing that, and I try to, one of the things that I've done over quarantine is clean up my social media feed. What am I
Mm-hmm.
looking at? You know what I mean? And like I need to see that. Like I need to see more laughs. I need to see more kindness. I need to see
Mm-hmm.
authenticity. You know what I mean? The things that I'm not getting in everyday, interactions. Cause, right now, so I mean, this wear a mask. I can't see your face. I know I'm not really, I'm not seeing people in their normal routines. Everyone's on edge. They're like looking at each other like, you know, um, I don't know what this is, but it's so weird. I have a thing about eye contact. When I look at people, I smile at them. That's just natural for me.
What a concept.
I'm telling you, right? And this pandemic has made a lot of people like look down when they walk by you. Now that's something I'm not, sadly, a lot of people did that with me walking down the street because I'm a large person of color, right? And that could be probably a little overwhelming for some. But I always like that always bugged the shit out of me. I'm like, dude, look up. Just like this looking down at the ground. It's so for whatever reason, it just I don't know. It's probably like acknowledgement, and it doesn't feel good when somebody doesn't like meet you
Mhm.
kind of with their eyes or whatever. But yeah, it's just so it's so strange when we're not like kind to each other, man.
Oh
And
my goodness, it's harder. It's so easy to be nice.
it
It
is right.
actually takes more energy to like be an asshole. I don't get it. Going back to what you said though,
What?
about a couple of things that you said that actually like I appreciate is this idea of like that you're always if you don't agree with somebody that you're gonna like that doesn't mean that you're gonna automatically like DQ them as a conversation. And
No.
I think that there's like cancel culture right now and there's all these things that I feel I have like a generational disconnect from. I feel like when I talk to my younger siblings, like they're so like they have all this I don't know, it's different. For me, it's like I'm gonna be curious. Well, I'm gonna protect my peace. And so like if I can already tell that like this is not gonna go somewhere that makes sense, or like you don't believe in science, or you don't believe in like basic things, like or you
Mhm.
don't believe in like basic respect,
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to try to lead with curiosity, but generally I'm going to try to. And I think that that's um it's a miss when we're not actually trying to actively engage with each other and find that common ground. Again, going back to like why I even like go to all these trainings with law enforcement or talk to, or like or will reach out and follow up with different officers and ask for their opinions. What was that interaction like for you? Like what was my clinician okay? Like how did that go? Which really I care, but mostly it's like that I want them to put a face to that relationship, to that connection. And so yeah, that's like definitely a value of mine that I struggle with, and that I struggle around other people that I think are just like a little bit more quick to shut that down. And then where are we? Then we're right where we started, and what's the point?
I see that a lot in my class in the classroom, and that's something that I really want to um, bring to a classroom in the future. Is really talking about, disagreeing in the relationships, right? I think we're getting quicker and quicker to write people off. Like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, I just can't connect with you. I just can't believe you're not thinking the same way. I'm like, well, think about that statement.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're not thinking the same way I am, so I can't talk to you. That's crazy. Yeah, when you really sit there with it, you're like, yeah, that doesn't sound very good. You know what I mean? Like, yes, we're not gonna have the same opinion. We have different experiences. We're coming from different environments, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, um,
And then it's hard. I mean, because just even I also like in the last few years of my life, I think I try to really hold multiple perspectives as often as possible, right? And so then it's like the flip side of it, right? Is currently some political point of views or some voting habits can be acts of violence,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so then how do you reconcile that?
Not easily. Not easily. Relationships are complicated. No one ever said this shit was easy. That's why you lead with kindness. It's a little, it's a good starting point. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's a good starting point. Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I see that in social work specifically, right? There's these like ideologies that I think a lot of folks are just like hell bent on, like, no, this is the way it's supposed to go. I'm like, nah, this isn't really the purpose of, I don't want to speak so definitively, but I think that the purpose of the classroom discussion and just the exchange of ideas is to like almost like challenge your thoughts, even as right as you might think you are. Maybe you're not. Maybe there is something there that you could learn. As a matter of fact, there's always something that you can learn, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I approach life similar to you, with curiosity. Like, I'm a curious person, but I approach people and I'm fascinated by people. Like, I was
Yeah.
at dinner yesterday and like I was just talking, I didn't um I was talking to a few folks that I'd never met, and I wasn't getting that same curiosity back, and I was like, no, dude, who are you? Like, what'd you do today? And asking what they did today was like, what? I don't get it. Why are you asking me what I did today? Like,
That's my sister calls that social worker face. She's like, it doesn't take you long to get people's whole story.
it's
And
true,
I was like,
man.
there you go. There you go with your social worker face. We're like at a social event and I have like so and then like all of a sudden I'm like, you know, but yeah, I think that you either have that or you don't. I
Uh,
think likewise I am fascinated by people, mostly positive, but sometimes I'm fascinated by how wild people are and I'm like, that's wild. Like
Come on. Who
that's
doesn't like a little wild? Who doesn't like a little wild? You gotta be, yeah, you should be fascinated. Um, do you get, man, do you get annoyed sometimes? I mean, we were talking heavy social work here, right? Do you do you find that they're almost like super social workers where you're like, okay, look, like turn it off. You know what I mean? Like, all right, like
I don't think I
maybe that's you.
it's definitely
It
me. You
is you.
called it right. It is me. But I don't know. I don't really have that many like actual social worker friends. Like I said, I don't go to work to make friends. Like I'm
Right.
very like at work. And especially like as you move up in like the nonprofit,
Mm,
whatever, like I've been always been like the youngest person in the room or one of the younger people in the room. I'm very brown. I'm very crass. I can be very crass in my words. I don't believe in like social working at work. Like that's another thing that like as a supervisor, as a director, I don't believe like we don't need to counsel people to do a better job. Like it is still a job. And so I don't know. I don't know that I have a lot of social worker friends. Um
look, it can get overwhelming, and I think you need to. I mean, it's a great thing because you can like step away, right? Sometimes you do have to step away. Absolutely, and that's something again that I'm seeing already. You know what I mean? It's super easy to overwhelm yourself. Especially if you're someone who wants to help. Man, you can work yourself into a real frenzy. You know what I mean? You um There was a day where, I ran back-to-back groups and that was 4 hours. And then I had another client an hour later. And then I was doing some reading. And then, by end of the day, like I was nothing. I was mush. Brain
Yeah.
was gone. I really couldn't formulate real sentences. Um, we talk a lot about, countertransference and what that does. And I was feeling it, right? Like I was just like, oh my God, I'm just overloaded with people's stories and what they put on me that day, which I'm happy about, right? Like in one sense, I'm super grateful that they were able to connect with me in that way. And that means that, something's something's working. Uh, but I also have had to implement like a routine where I'm like, nah, man, this is your time. Do what you want. Like, go have fun, laugh a lot, and if there's something that I miss is, being able to go outside and just laugh at shit
Yeah.
and be funny. Sometimes there's such a seriousness to social work because we are dealing with such severe situations at times. You know what I mean? And yeah, it can drain you. Uh,
Yeah.
so I maybe joke around too much, but it's enough for me. You know what I mean? Because I
It's important. I think comedy is important in mental health. I think
yeah,
that especially like if you take the lead by your clients and by the families that you're working with, a lot of times like they're fucking hilarious also. Like they think the shit is funny too. So like,
hilarious.
so let's go there. It's cool. Like make yourself human. Like that's a very like you make allowing yourself to have a human experience with your clients is also important, right? Like I think we're trained to be these like robots and like you never self-disclose and you never do anything that's like not robot like, and
Yeah.
at the end of the day that's not realistic. And of course like everything should be intentional. Any sort of like self-disclosure interaction should be intentional, and why are you doing it and who does it serve. But even being a robot, like that is not my like my clinical style either.
What's been your you talked about nonprofit and it rang a bell. What's been your experience? Because I think this isn't necessarily talked about a lot. I think as a whole, society looks at nonprofits as like this bigger than life. Like it's always nonprofits can't do any wrong. Or like, oh, it's a nonprofit. It's quick. There's something behind the word. Um, and in my experience, they have been pretty much dominated. They have been serving the nonprofits I've worked for have been serving communities of color, but structurally they have been dominated by white people.
I
And
mean, I think that, go ahead.
nah, and I want to know what your experience has been because I think we're quick to say something's a nonprofit, and they're like, oh, we give them money, so we're doing something really well, and then you don't really understand kind of how some of these organizations operate, small or large, you know what I mean? And like who's making the calls, how the money's being spent, who's writing the programs, you know what I mean? So what's been your experience? Has it been similar in that sense?
For sure. And I mean, I think the fact that mental health is dominated by white women, right? Like that's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
That is a fact. And I think that most nonprofits and most mental health related nonprofits, the higher up that you go, the wider that it gets.
Yeah,
Fact. Like that's a fact. Like we don't need to argue that.
sure.
At any time that you have sort of like a dominant culture leading
Yep.
any sort of an organization, and especially like a dominant culture that does not necessarily reflect the people that you're serving,
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be a disconnect and there's going to be misses. And so that has been my experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been thinking about this a lot lately, of this idea of like code switching and like being a
Mm-hmm.
hard worker, and like what are my own like internal white supremacist values that I bring to the work, which I think are that I'm very hardworking, and that very early on in my career as a bilingual clinician, I was often asked to do more and more.
Yeah.
And as a bilingual clinician, being asked to do more, what that really means is that you're being asked to serve more and more people that look like you.
Yeah.
So you saying no to that hits different.
Yeah.
when those families are having similar experiences that you may have had growing up.
Yep.
It's not just like, oh, I have a boundary. Like I have a boundary. I am self-care. It's not just that. It's I am saying no to so and so who their story resonates with me.
No.
And they are not going to be served because I said no.
Right.
Like that's how it lands. It's not like systemically, structurally, there aren't enough Latinx folks in grad schools. We don't do a good job at hiring. We don't do a good job of retaining. All of those things are true and
Right.
fact and impact that decision. But in that moment,
Yes.
you're like, fuck. I'm like, fuck, Joe, you're really gonna say no? Like, come on. Like,
Yeah.
and so my experience, I think, has been that I was able in all of my post grad school like work environments, and they've all been nonprofits. I've been able to build up my social capital and make myself a pretty like desirable employee. Sometimes I think at the expense of my energy and my spirit. And I think that in the last few years, I've definitely gotten better at advocating for myself. But I've also gotten promoted pretty regularly, right? And like I've done well. And that I think is because I've been able to fit all the shapes that I was supposed to fit. And I also am extremely honest and I'm extremely, my dad always used to like, I take most of my like professional advice from my father, who's just like, has a sixth grade education, came to this country when he was 19, has, a house in Oakland, a house in San Francisco, has land in the Central Valley, has like land in Guatemala, land in Mexico. They're very, they have been able to like do things for themselves. And he's like, if the worst thing that happens to you today is that you lose your job, that's cool. You still have to come back and be you.
Yeah.
You still have to come back home and be okay with what you did at work today. So how are you going to like be okay with that? And so I've always led with that little bit of like chip on my shoulder of like, I'm gonna be all right. So I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say. Like I'm gonna let you guys know about yourselves. I'm going to ask for support. I'm gonna shop around. I'm gonna let you guys know that I'm shopping around if this isn't working for me, and we're gonna figure it out. But I think that I have a certain amount of privilege to be able to say that, right?
Of course.
I know that I'm not going to be destitute in the street
Mm-hmm.
if I lose my job today.
Yeah.
But I do have to have that integrity with myself, and I do have to be able to like advocate for myself. And it's much easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just talking about this with my parents yesterday, or like the day before yesterday. I was like, you guys have taught me like the values that I need to have and like the integrity that I need to come to work with, but you guys can't coach me through those conversations. You guys haven't had to have those conversations. And so it's like, I've kind of had to teach that second part. I've had to teach that to myself, or I've had to find mentors at work that are going to help me get through those tough conversations with my supervisors or my coworkers when I am being microaggressed, even though Ibram Kendi says that there's nothing micro about racism, that we should just say that like it was a racist incident, but like whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so I've had to navigate that. And I think that I've done it by connecting with people and finding people that I can trust, that have been in this work longer than me, that value me, and that challenge me.
Yeah.
Right? And so I have this thing where I haven't let go of any previous supervisors. Like I still have them on my calendar, like for my like our weekly or bi-weekly meetings. I'm still like, nope, like I trust you. We built that relationship. I'm not gonna give that up. And white people keep that by like going golfing or like, fuck, I don't fucking know, right? And so like in my mind, I'm like, how am I going to keep these things? Like, how am I going to keep these supports? And so my experience has probably been similar to most people of color in that there have been moments of being extremely uncomfortable. And I'm still here.
Yeah, uncomfortable is not always a bad thing. I mean, that's life. I mean, I think that's where a lot of the growth happens, in those uncomfortable situations, right? It's when stress comes on. Similarly, all stress isn't bad. You know what I mean? Like there's something real good, and when you're in the heat and you're just like, oh man, how am I gonna do it, man? I gotta work through this, but on the other side you're like, yeah, I got through that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So how you been taking care of yourself? You got a lot of, I think I've heard you talk about navigating and advocating, which are, the two words heavy in the rotation of the social worker, right? But how you been taking care of yourself during your career, specifically now, but yeah, How you been holding up?
I spend a lot of intentional time with people that I love.
Hmm.
I have a very big family that is both, like amazing and also can be overbearing sometimes and can be a lot. And so I try to make my time with them pretty intentional. And yeah, a lot of like intentional time with people that I love, both like chosen family and blood family. I I live with my sister, and so we got bikes like 2 months ago, and so we've been biking around, and that's been fun. Like biking around Oakland has been hilarious.
I just bought one last week. So yeah, yeah. Biking's fun. I mean, I was terrified to do it before because there were so many cars out, and I was like, yo, I don't trust it. But now, things are much quieter. I was like, all right, I'll try it out. But yeah, you were saying you ride bikes with your sister.
Do you wear a helmet?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Um,
Great. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not that. I am not that 15-year-old kid. I'm not wearing that helmet. That helmet looks like it looks stupid. I spent 20 minutes in the store with that helmet. Like, is this the right one? You know what I mean? I was asking the guy, like, be like, wait, so do I have to, how long does it last, and what is it made out of, and which one's better? I'm pretty sure he was annoyed as hell.
good,
But
good.
dude, this is important.
Good.
To be the saving grace. Like, come on, man.
Yes.
But I was actually surprised though. There was like a helmet that was like almost $200. I was like, what the hell is this? I was like, for a bike? I'm like, I mean, I guess.
Yeah,
Whatever.
that's
Anyway,
a lot, but it is your brain, so.
it is right. You want to protect that. So you've been hanging with sis, riding bikes.
I go bike riding. I try to be active. I try to like move my body. I try to laugh as often as possible. I've had like little weekend trips that I've scheduled. I've been just like we went to Palm Springs a few weeks ago. Me and like my close group of girlfriends. We got on planes to do that.
Look
We're
at
trying
you on planes.
we're trying to be like as responsible as possible. So we all got tested. Well, we get tested for COVID like every 2 weeks in this house just because.
Yeah.
Definitely before and after getting on the plane, like I wouldn't see my parents until I got a clean like COVID test. Like just making sure that like I'm not being an asymptomatic asshole either. But traveling historically is something that is really important and close to my heart. And so it's been hard this year to not be able to do that. So I have Portland coming up next week and then like Vegas
Portland?
after that.
Boy,
Yeah.
what
So
are you going there for vacation?
I'm going. One of my best friends lives there, so I'm gonna go see her, and then I might go see what
Portland.
this protest is about.
Yeah, it is going down. Oh my lord! You look at you, diving deep. Where are you going? Portland. Oh,
So,
okay.
but then I'm going to Vegas a few weeks after that. So like balance, balance.
You're going to Vegas. Vegas is vacation. Another vacation.
They're both vacationing out. They're just like 3 or 4 day trips, but like
Oh,
those things are good for my mental health to like look forward to, where I will disconnect, where I will like not be tethered to my phones or my computer, and just be able to interact with folks that are my loved ones.
how many phones? How many phones do you have? How many laptops do you have?
Just one, but I have like 2 screens.
Yeah, I just got my two screen setup at home, and I was like, oh god, I really don't want to do this, but it's necessary. It's helpful, you know what I mean? But I felt myself like getting into like, oh my god, I have two screens. Currently I have 3 laptops. I'm like, ugh, ugh.
How do
Ugh.
you take care of yourself?
Recently active, been trying to be as active as possible. Um, what else have I been doing? I went on a trip. I got out of San Francisco, and I didn't need to be there. So I'm actually going to San Diego tomorrow. Actually, I'm going to San Diego tonight. I'm hopping on a train to San Diego, and I, I've been seeking out humor as much as I can, and it's been hard, man. I'm not gonna lie. This has been a really rough last couple months of just so much thought. You know what I mean? So much thought, and reassessing relationships. I think I mentioned that to you earlier. And, you know, a lot of, I'm my biggest critic. And I have been extremely critical of myself in the last 2 months about, am I doing enough?
Mm,
And I enjoy challenges. I love challenges. But
mm,
um, part of that, though, there is that critical analysis of myself where I'm just like, man, yeah, you know, you get into those ruts, and sometimes you know they're longer than some are longer than others, and you know, I would assume that's part of grad school, right?
mm,
That is part of that process. Um, so I've been really trying to find people who are able to be empathetic and understanding, but also able to talk a little shit and be easy. You know
mm.
what I mean? Like I said it earlier. This world has always been chaotic. It always has been chaotic.
Yeah.
And if you don't see that, then I think, you know, you've turned you yeah, I don't know, you've turned yeah, you kind of turned away. Like I see kid when I walk outside, I'm like, look, there's, you know, sometimes I'll sometimes I look up. I'm like, we're in this globe. We're in this globe in space that's rotating. There's a sun that provides light, and it's hella far. But at any moment, if the temperature increases, we're screwed. You know what I mean? You just have those moments. You're like, yo, this is crazy. This is
Yeah.
nuts. And then, you know, don't don't use one of these. You turn this thing on. I always wonder what it would be like if you were like if you were like an alien and you and you came to Earth and you know somebody gave you a phone. Like you're like, what the hell is going on? Like what is what are they doing? What the fuck are they doing? Yeah, man. I went off on a tangent there, but yeah, I've really been seeking. I mean, I've been seeking out. I've been seeking out people, and I'm a huge extrovert. I'm a huge extrovert, and not getting that energy. It was rough, man.
Yeah.
It was rough. So I would say searching for people and this has been I you know I picked up not picked up but you know I got started DJing like 2 years ago and that was you know just the passion I can kind of let loose um but yeah a lot of open water swim. I swim a lot, so I swim out in the bay.
Do
And
you?
yeah, I swim in the bay once a week.
Wow. Where? Where do you
So normally like aquatic park. Uh,
really? You're one of those people?
yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah. I've done 2 races. I swam from Alcatraz to the city, and then I did bridge to bridge from Golden Gate Bridge to the Bay Bridge. Um, I'm actually in the. I guess this is my manifesting moment. So I'm actually working on organizing a swim from Alcatraz to the Warrior Stadium, um, specifically for people of color, open water swimmers. Yeah, because that's something I've always been super passionate about.
How
My
long have you been doing that?
well, open water swimming.
Yeah.
Um, I want to say four. Let's see, 2017. So 4 years, 4 years. Yeah, I mean, I've always been a swimmer, but you know, like I said, that challenge. You know, one of my one of the I used to coach. I coach urban high school swim team now, but the when I used to coach age group swimming, like club swim, there was another coach that went to SI with me, or he actually didn't go to SI with me, but he went to SI. And his where's his family from? El Salvador, right? And we kind of connected as people, coaches of color, just kind of like, you know, just we connected either way. He's like, yeah, he's a triathlete. And he's like, yeah, you ever want to go out in the bay? I was like, ooh, the bay. I was like, yeah, fuck, all right, let's do it. But you know what I mean? And I did it. I was like, oh damn, this is okay. This is a real challenge. We're talking about, wow, okay, all right, oh yeah, I'm down. And one of the things that I've come, one of the one of the many realizations that I've come to is I'm infatuated with youthful energy,
Mm.
and one of the things I fear is becoming old. I never want to be old. Like I forever want to have the. And I mean, obviously, we're gonna age or whatever, right? But I don't want to fall into that. Just like I gave up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so one day we were training for a race, and I asked, I was like, "Yo, Mauricio, what year did you graduate from SI?" Because I never asked him how old he was. Because I mean, there'd be times where like I was hauling ass. I'm like, dude, I cannot catch this fucking dude. Like, what the fuck? Like, and I was just trying. I was like, I mean, not granted, I probably outweigh him by like 100 pounds, and he's a triathlete, right? So I asked him. He's like, oh yeah, I graduated in 2010. I was like, okay, I feel much better. Secretly, I feel much better. I'm not going to tell you that, but I was like, thank God. I was like, okay. But again, another reminder of like, I like to be around you, like young energy. I'm like, dude, you are hauling ass. And I was telling him, I was like, dude, my goal is to catch him in one of these races.
Wow,
But
that's cool. That's scary. Good
but
for you.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I feel safer out in that water than I do on the street sometimes. I tell people that all the time. It's a very weird feeling, and even weirder to like talk about. Where I'm like, man, I feel like I understand the water. I know how to move with water, but if I was walking down the street and I see some police officers, I damn sure have more anxiety there. I'm like, ugh, fuck. All right, how's this gonna work out? Like,
Wow.
you know what I mean? Um, but we could probably keep going, and I know I want to be respectful of your time. I see you over there starting that side. I like, all right, dude, we've been doing this for a while, but I want to do this.
Great. This has been great. Thank you for having me.
I want to do this again, um, and I got a couple things on my brain that I want to bring up, and I think, man, it's great to reconnect with you. Um, because I don't know how many people are able to not only see someone that you knew when you were like a teenager, but see them through as an adult and doing the same work. You know what I mean? So I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity. And so I'm going to ask you one question to end the podcast, and that is, what is something that you love?
Hmm.
Can you hear these dogs in the background?
Yeah,
Oh,
but
okay.
only because you just pointed it out.
Oh, okay.
Because I was thinking about my answer. You know, my family.
Hmm.
My family. Everything that I am, everything that I aspire to be, all my values are tethered to my family and my upbringing and my connections to my very extensive Navarro side and the Perez side. They're very special people, and specifically my parents. I'm extremely close to them, and I live 2 exits away from them, and they are here like every other day, and they're great, and they're really special people. So,
Shout
yeah.
out to the parents. Beautiful. All right. Well, we'll do it again. I'll set up some time, and
Yeah.
we got
Thank you so much. You had great questions, great energy. Yay for like brown men in social work. It's so
the
exciting. I love everything about it. Yeah, let me know. I'm around.
I'm gonna email you because I want to get any information or program, and like just so I can put stuff together, because I think everyone needs to have access and to the educational pieces and like learning what kind of work you're doing and all that good stuff. So either way, yeah, I'll email you and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks.
Bye.